So, I've been getting a lot of questions from viewers and clients asking whether President Trump's executive orders, the one that he's been putting out recently, have actually abolished the IRS or whether he maybe fired all of the IRS employees. So, let me just answer that right up front and tell you no, he did not. He didn't abolish the IRS and he hasn't fired all the IRS employees. Not yet, but he has been signing a flurry of executive orders. He has issued orders on immigration, energy policy, and of course, DEI. But here at Legacy Tax, we focus on taxation and financial planning. So let's take a look at the executive order that Trump issued, which places a freeze on the IRS's ability to hire new employees. We'll also discuss how this affects the IRS and how it might affect you if you owe back taxes. Let's start by taking a look at the executive order itself. Hiring freeze. By the authority vested in me as the president and by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, I hereby order a freeze on the hiring of federal civilian employees to be applied throughout the executive branch. As part of this freeze, no federal civilian position that is vacant at noon on January the 20th, 2025 may be filled, and no new position may be created except as otherwise provided for in this memorandum or other applicable law. Except as provided below, this freeze applies to all executive branch departments and agencies, regardless of their sources of operational and programmatic funding. This order does not apply to military personnel of the Armed Forces. The Office of Personnel Management, OPM, may grant exemptions from this freeze where those exemptions are otherwise necessary. Within 90 days of the date of this memorandum, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget, in consultation with the Director of OPM and the Administrator of the United States DOGE Service, USDS, shall submit a plan to reduce the size of the federal government's workforce through efficiency improvements and attrition. Upon issuance of the OMB plan, this memorandum shall expire for all executive departments and agencies with the exception of the Internal Revenue Service. This memorandum shall remain in effect for the IRS until the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Director of OMB and the Administrator of the USDS, determines that it is in the national interest to lift the freeze. Contracting outside of the federal government to circumvent the intent of this memorandum is prohibited. So what does this mean? Well, first, it does not mean that anyone at the IRS has been fired, at least not by this memo in particular. It also does not mean that the IRS has been shut down, at least not yet. The freeze simply means that they cannot hire any new staff. So when will the hiring freeze end? There's not a time frame on it. It simply says that this memorandum shall remain in effect for the IRS until the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Director of OMB and DOGE, determines that it is in the national interest to lift the freeze. But when will that be? There's no timeline here, so I don't really know. If you've been following Trump, you know that he's not a fan of the IRS and wants to shut it down or at least limit its operations. So anyway, what does this mean for the average American taxpayer? It basically means that the IRS is not going to have the resources to go after the rich or the corporations that aren't paying what they owe. I'm talking about the audits of those who are like trying to hide millions of dollars in tax revenue. Big players, big players like that. They can hire teams of lawyers and mountains of accountants to keep the IRS at bay. Those types of cases can take a lot of time and a lot of manpower. And if the IRS's resources are hampered, they likely won't be able to effectively pursue those particular taxpayers. So what's the IRS going to do? Are they going to, if they lose the necessary resources and they're not able to hire any new employees, I predict that the IRS is going to target the easy targets. The Schedule C business owner who hasn't filed in a few years, the mom and pop that got behind on their taxes and now they owe 50 or 100,000 to the IRS. These players are easy targets for the IRS to go after. They don't require a lot of manpower, and it just doesn't take as long to work these types of cases. Big corporations, on the other hand, can afford $2,000 an hour to pay a partner at a huge law firm to be able to protect their interests. Big corporations and wealthy individuals can drag on for years and years and may require high-level IRS attorneys to spend a lot of time pursuing the cases. Mom and pop taxpayers, on the other hand, don't have the budget to do all of that. In the case of small taxpayers, the IRS will simply mail a computer-generated notice that says, hey, you owe us some money. Send it to us by such and such a date. And if you don't respond the way that they want you to, the IRS will simply start taking money out of your bank account and start like emptying your accounts and your paycheck and whatnot. That's the majority of people in this country. And that's what happens to the average Joe kind of taxpayer. That's what I expect to see. More pressure on regular taxpayers. If the IRS can't hire the personnel to go after the big corporations and the big taxpayers. So that's just my interpretation and my prediction of how this is going to play out. Now, another thing, we're also probably going to see a lot more delays in handling tax cases. A lot of clients call my office for status updates, and they want to know, hey, what's going on with my case? And more often than not, the answer is we're still waiting on the IRS exams branch to process a tax return. Or maybe we're waiting for a collections manager in the IRS collections unit to approve a partial pay installment agreement. It's already taken the IRS an inordinate amount of time to process things, and I predict it'll be even longer now. Now, I've also heard rumors that the IRS will be expanding its use of private debt collection agencies to take up the slack for IRS personnel that undoubtedly retire or resign. The IRS has used private companies in a limited capacity in the past. They've used them to help with debt collection, really just small like IRS debt cases for many years now. These private nonprofit companies normally handle IRS cases with really small balances, or sometimes those where the IRS itself has not been able to locate the taxpayer. Over the past several years, there have been lots and lots of complaints against these private companies. The Treasury Inspector General said that the abuse and harassment of taxpayers by the IRS itself, but also by private debt collection employees while attempting to collect taxes, harms taxpayers and can have a negative impact on what they call voluntary compliance. Essentially, that means that if these people are rude and they're abusive, then some people will just say, hey, screw you. I'm not gonna comply with these regulations. So in summary, that's what I think is going to happen. I think we're going to see more private debt collection companies, possibly. I think we'll see increased delays in dealing with the IRS. And I think it's very, very likely that we will also see them really focus on smaller taxpayers instead of going after the quote unquote big fish. But listen, what do you think? What do you think is going to be the effect of these two executive orders from President Trump, the hiring freeze? And we didn't really talk so much about the quote unquote buyouts that's going on, but that's another thing that's going on around right now. The government has been offering people a very vaguely written and kind of non-specific buyout, or what do they call it? A deferred resignation. It's just weird. But let me know in the comments. What do you guys think about these two things? Do you think we're heading in the right direction? Do you think we're heading in the wrong direction? I want to hear what you think. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.